It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic has offered his congratulations and best wishes on the occasion of Eid al-Adha to members of the People's National Army, the constituent bodies, doctors, and health personnel. Algerians, like the rest of the Muslim community in the world, are celebrating Eid al-Adha, one of the biggest holidays in the Islamic calendar. And the Zionist occupation forces have stormed the Bab al-Rahma mosque in the eastern part of the Al-Aqsa mosque on Eid Day and arrested a number of worshippers. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, Algerians, like the rest of the Muslim community in the world, are celebrating Eid al-Adha, one of the biggest holidays in the Islamic calendar. Known as the Feast of Sacrifice, the revered observance coincides with the final rites of the annual Hajj, or pilgrimage, in Saudi Arabia. Eid al-Adha commemorates the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail as an act of obedience to Allah. The day is marked with the sacrifice of an animal, usually a sheep or a cow, and the distribution of the meat among neighbors, family members, and the poor. The President of the Republic has extended, on the occasion of Eid al-Adha, to members or his best wishes to members of the People's National Army, the constituent bodies, doctors, and health personnel. On his Twitter account, the President Tebboune wished a happy Eid al-Adha to all the valiant members of the National People's Army, to the brave men and women stationed at the borders to protect our beloved country. The President of the Republic also extended his best wishes to the members of the National Gendarmerie, the police, civil protection, and customs. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has exchanged greetings on the occasion of the advent of Eid al-Adha with his brother, the President of the Republic of Tunisia, Kais Saied, to whom he wished, as well as the brotherly Tunisian people, further welfare and progress. President Tebboune exchanged best wishes with a number of other presidents, the details of which are with our colleague Jamal Salmani.
In turn, President Said thanked his brother President Tebboune and offered him his best wishes for health and well-being and more progress and prosperity for the Algerian people. President Tebboune also received a telephone call from his brother and President of the State of Palestine, Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, during which he presented his wishes to him on the eve of Eid al-Adha, while wishing him and the Algerian people more progress and prosperity. Meanwhile, the President of the Republic exchanged greetings on the occasion of the advent of Eid al-Adha with his brother, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who wished him, as well as the Algerian people, more well-being and stability. Earlier, the President of the Republic received a telephone call from his brother, the Emir of the State of Qatar, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, who presented him and the Algerian people as well their wishes on the eve of Eid al-Adha. For his part, the President thanked his brother, the Emir of the State of Qatar, for his noble sentiments, extending him in turn his best wishes on this occasion and wishing the brotherly Qatari people more prosperity and serenity. The leaders of the two countries also welcomed the privileged relations linking the two brotherly countries and agreed thereby to hold a meeting at the height of these fraternal relations.
Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman has extended his wishes to the Algerian people on the occasion of the Sacrifice Festival, or Eid al-Adha. The holidays follow one another throughout the year. It is a sacrifice festival, Eid al-Adha, with a 3-day leave decided by the President of the Republic to offer enough time for Algerians to enjoy their families and their loved ones. He said, "On this dear occasion, I extend my best wishes to Algerians in Algeria and abroad and pray the Almighty Allah to grant you His blessings and to accept our good deeds as well as those of our pilgrims, wishing them a safe return to their families and to country. Happy Eid to Algerians and Algeria." And Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman has performed the Eid al-Adha prayer at the Great Mosque of Algiers among many faithful in an atmosphere of piety and serenity. More details with our colleague Jamal Salmani.
The prayer was performed along with the Minister of State Advisor to the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelaziz Khalaf, government members as well as members of the Arab and Muslim Diplomatic Corps accredited in Algeria. In his two sermons, the Imam reminded the faithful that Eid al-Adha, which comes after the performance of a sacred rite, namely the pilgrimage, is a day when the faithful glorify the rights of Allah and celebrate the Sunnah of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, emphasizing that on this religious holiday, all Muslims are called upon to show solidarity, tolerance, and reconciliation. He also urged the faithful to maintain ties of kinship to show good neighborliness and help the needy. This year, Eid al-Adha coincides with the approach of the National Day of Independence and Youth. He recalled, adding that the Algerian people are sovereign. They were born free and will remain so, and will never accept injustice and slavery. Meanwhile, the Imam called on young Algerians to show awareness and vigilance to thwart malicious plans which aim to stray them from the right path through drugs and narcotics. After the prayer, the Prime Minister received the wishes of the government members, the members of the diplomatic corps, and the faithful who performed the prayer in the Great Mosque of Algiers.
And Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman has chaired a government meeting at which several sectors were examined. Jamal Silmani again.
In the interior field, the government examined a draft executive decree on the unique national identification number presented by the Interior Minister. For his part, the Minister of Finance presented a progress report on the work of the multi-sector working group charged with examining the issue of bank debts contracted by beneficiaries of the National Agency of Support and Development of Entrepreneurship. The presentation provided an overview of the situation of the scheme managed by the agency through performance indicators such as the collection rate and the compensation capacity of the guarantee fund. Meanwhile, the government heard a presentation on the pension scheme for the Mujahideen presented jointly by the Mujahideen Minister and Labour Minister. The presentation reviewed the National Social Protection System for the category of Mujahideen and Shuhada beneficiaries' rights and privileges in terms of social insurance and retirement. Finally, in the field of social security, the Labour Minister gave a presentation on the introduction of contractualisation in the field of medical care.
And still in Algeria, the Minister of Energy and Mines has received the CEO of the African Energy Chamber, NJ Ayouk. The two have examined cooperation relations between Algeria and the Energy Institution, as well as means of boosting relations. Miriam Ziyan has more in this report.
The two parties have also evoked that the expertise of Algeria will bring African countries in the field of research and exploration of hydrocarbons, the development of deposits, the production and transport of electricity, as well as in the field of renewable energies. In this regard, Mr. Arqab affirmed Algeria's readiness to support and strengthen relations with African countries, the transfer of its know-how and expertise in these fields through training. During their meeting, the two parties welcomed the joint efforts of African countries within the OPEC, as well as within the framework of the African Organization of Petroleum-Producing Countries. For his part, the president of the African Energy Chamber, NJ Ayouk, highlighted the importance of Algeria's support for activities of various energy organizations in Africa, in particular cooperation with the Algerian private sector and the possibility of providing services to African countries. He also invited the Minister of Energy to take part in the African Week of Energy next October in Cape Town in South Africa.
To the Middle East now, where the Zionist occupation forces have stormed the Bab al-Rahma Mosque in the eastern part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and arrested a number of worshippers. The Wafa news agency reported that the occupation forces arrested a youngster in the mosque esplanade and arrested others while coming out of the mosque. The Executive Office of Sahrawi Human Rights Defenders in Western Sahara called on the international community to accelerate the implementation of international legitimacy in Western Sahara and to guarantee the right of people to self-determination. Miriam Ziyan has more.
In a long press release issued on the occasion of the International Day in support of victims of torture and other cruel, degrading, or ill treatment, the Sahrawi organization urged the International Committee of the Red Cross the UN and all international organizations to counter Morocco's expansionist policy and its violations of human rights in Western Sahara. The Executive Office of Sahrawi Human Rights Defenders also recalled the need to work on the implementation of international humanitarian law, given that the region is classified by the UN among the territories awaiting their turn in decolonization. The organization have called on protecting the Sahrawi civilians and to support the victims of torture and different crimes of war and crimes against humanity carried out by the Moroccan occupying authorities. These acts are the subject of international human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, which has confirmed that the Moroccan police continue to practice multiple forms of torture in Morocco and Western Sahara in order to silence activists and to repress dissenting voices.
And President Julius Maada Bio has won re-election in Sierra Leone's 10th presidential vote. The election commission confirmed, but his main challenger was quick to reject the results. Camara 72 said that he categorically rejected the results. It is a sad day for our beloved country, he said. And finally, pilgrims are performing the stoning of the Deval ceremony in Mina on the third day of Hajj, marking the final stage of the pilgrimage and the start of Eid al-Adha. This ritual is called Jamarat al-Aqaba and is carried out at noon each day. Pilgrims will leave Mina for Mecca before Maghrib or sunset prayers on the 12th day of Dhu al-Hijjah. If they can't, they must perform the ritual again before returning to Mecca the following day. After saying dawn prayers on the morning of Eid al-Adha, millions of pilgrims set off on the journey from Muzdalifah to Mina. The walk can be long and tiring, so many people choose to go by bus or train. Pilgrims collected pebbles from Muzdalifah last night and are making their way to Jamarat Bridge for the stoning of the Deval. It is one of the final rites of Hajj, which takes place in the structure with 3 pillars symbolizing the Deval. Every pilgrim should hit one of the 3 walls of the Jamarat on the 3 different occasions. And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin in English for today. Time now for a weekly program, starting with my colleague Hannah Dalil with a special program on Eid al-Adha. This will be followed by another program on traditional couscous in Algeria by my colleague Jamal Slimani. As for me, we'll meet again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Till then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International. Have a good day and Saha Eidkom.
Hello and welcome to this special program devoted to the celebrations of the Eid al-Adha festival. Algerians, like the rest of the Muslims all over the world, celebrate Eid al-Adha, called here Eid al-Kabir or the Great Eid, which means festival of sacrifice, and it is the second most important festival in the Muslim calendar. Eid al-Adha is the latter of the 2 Eid holidays, the former being Eid al-Fitr. The basis for Eid al-Adha comes from the 196th verse of the 2nd surah of the Holy Quran. The festival remembers the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail when God ordered him to. Eid al-Adha is a public holiday in Muslim countries. Eid al-Adha celebrates the occasion when Allah appeared to Prophet Ibrahim in a dream and asked him to sacrifice his young firstborn son, Ismail, as an act of submission to God's command. As Abraham was about to kill his son, Allah intervened to provide him with a lamb to sacrifice instead. In the lunar calendar, Eid al-Adha falls on the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah. In the International Gregorian calendar, the dates vary from year to year, drifting approximately 11 days earlier each year. According to Islamic tradition, approximately 4,000 years ago, the Valley of Mecca, in present-day Saudi Arabia, was a dry, rocky, and inhabited place. God instructed Ibrahim to bring Hagar, his Egyptian wife, and Ismail, his only child at the time, to Arabia from the land of Canaan. As Abraham was preparing for his return journey back to Canaan, Hagar asked him if God ordered him to leave her and Ismail there. Abraham was so sad that he could not say anything. He pointed to the sky, showing that God commanded him to do so. Then she said that God will not waste them and told Abraham to go. Though Prophet Abraham had left a large quantity of food and water with Hagar and Ismail, the supplies quickly ran out, and within a few days the two began to feel the pangs of hunger and dehydration. Hagar ran up and down between two hills called Safa and Al-Marwa 7 times in her desperate quest for water. Exhausted, she finally collapsed between her baby Ismail and prayed to God for deliverance. Miraculously, a spring of water gushed forth from the earth at the feet of baby Ismail. Other accounts have the angel Gabriel, Jibril, striking the earth and causing the spring to flow in abundance. The name of the well traditionally comes from the phrase Zum, Zum, meaning stop, which, according to a legend, was a command repeated by Hagar during her attempt to contain the spring. With this secure water supply known as the Zamzam well, they were not only able to provide for their own needs, but were also able to trade water with passing nomads for food and supplies. Years later, Prophet Abraham was instructed by God to return from Canaan to build a place of worship adjacent to Hagar's well, the Zamzam well. Abraham and Ismail constructed a stone and mortar structure known as the Kaaba, which was to be the gathering place for all who wished to strengthen their faith in God. As the years passed, Ismail was blessed with prophethood, Nubuwah, and gave the nomads of the desert his message of submission to God. After many centuries, Mecca became a thriving desert city and a major center for trade, thanks to its reliable water source, the well of Zamzam. One of the main trials of Abraham's life was to face the command of God to devote his dearest possession, his only son. Upon hearing this command, he prepared to submit to God's will. During this preparation, Satan, Shaitan, tempted Abraham and his family by trying to dissuade them from carrying out God's commandment, and Abraham drove Satan away by throwing pebbles at him. In commemoration of their rejection of Satan, stones are thrown at symbolic pillars signifying Satan during the Hajj rites. When Ismail was about 13, Abraham being 99, God decided to test their faith in public. Abraham had a recurring dream in which God was commanding him to offer his son as a sacrifice. An unimaginable act, sacrificing his son, which God had granted him after many years of deep prayer. Abraham knew that the dreams of the prophets were divinely inspired, and one of the ways in which God communicated with his prophets. When the intent of the dreams became clear to him, Abraham decided to fulfill God's command and offer Ismail for sacrifice. Although Abraham was ready to sacrifice his dearest for God's sake, he could not just go and drag his son to the place of sacrifice without his consent. Ismail had to be consulted as to whether he was willing to give up his life as fulfillment to God's command. This consultation would be a major test of Ismail's maturity in faith, love, and commitment for God, willingness to obey his father and sacrifice his own life for the sake of God. Prophet Abraham presented the matter to his son and asked for his opinion about the dreams of slaughtering him. Ismail did not show any hesitation or reservation, even for a moment. His mature response, his deep insight into the nature of his father's dreams, his commitment to God, and ultimately his willingness to sacrifice his own life for the sake of God were all unprecedented. When Abraham attempted to cut Ismail's throat, he was astonished to see that Ismail was unharmed, and instead he found a dead ram which was slaughtered. Abraham had passed the test by his willingness to carry out God's command, as mentioned in the Quran. As a reward for this sacrifice, God then granted Abraham the good news of the birth of his second son, Ishaq, Isaac, as mentioned in the Quran in Surah 37. Abraham had shown that his love for God superseded all others, that he would lay down his own life or the lives of those dearest to him in submission to God's command. And Muslims commemorate this ultimate act of sacrifice every year during Eid al-Adha. It is worth noting that this story is also found in the Jewish Torah and the Christian Old Testament, Genesis 22. Here, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, his son with Sarah, as Ismail was his son with Hagar. Today, most of Muslims all over the world can afford to sacrifice a ram, sometimes a goat, and even a calf or an ox, as a reminder of Abraham's obedience to Allah. The sacrifice is a voluntary act for other Muslims around the world. The animal must be healthy and over a year old. The meat is shared out among family, friends, and the poor, with each get a third share. Eid al-Adha starts with worshippers going to the mosque for prayers, after which everyone stands up to hug and greet one another. The traditional greeting here in Algeria is Saha Eidak, or Eidak Mabruk, or even Eidak Mubarak, meaning holiday blessings. Next, people visit each other's homes, offering homemade traditional cakes, dressed in their best clothes, especially children, and thanking Allah for all the blessings they have received. The Eid festival is also an opportunity for Muslims, as they celebrate, remind themselves of their own submission to God and their own willingness to sacrifice anything to God's wishes. That's all for today from me, Hannah Dalil, and the whole team of the English service of Radio Algeria International. A very happy Eid. Saha Eidkum, and bye for now.
Welcome to your weekly program, Destination Algeria. I'm Jamal Semeni. There are a number of great destinations in Algeria just waiting to be discovered. A curious mixture of cultures and influences. Algeria has something interesting to see in just about every city. The country is also the first largest on the African continent, so you can be sure that there are plenty of towns and cities to visit. Let's visit Algeria's fascinating destinations, you and I, together. Today we tell you about a famous Algerian dish. Considered to be the national dish of Algeria, couscous is a versatile, nutritious and delicious staple food served in a variety of different ways. Couscous is so essential in everyday life for Algerians that is often referred to simply as "taam," meaning food. Originating in North Africa, couscous is found on supermarket shelves around the world, while pre-cooked varieties put in this tasty ingredient on the table in 15 minutes. But many would argue that these forms of couscous, while being convenient for a busy household, cannot be compared with the original ingredient, which takes time, patience, and effort to produce and is really a labor of love. Couscous is generally made from semolina wheat and is traditionally done by the women of the household. A handful of freshly ground hard wheat is put on a large flat plate with salted water and a bit of flour sprinkled on it. The woman will roll the grains with her palms until little granules are formed. These are then gently shaken through sieves with different diameter holes to ensure granules are of a similar size before being stored. The couscous is dried in the sun. Alternatively, it is cooked before the drying process. To keep the granules separate and obtain a fluffy texture, couscous is best steamed. This is sometimes done over the stew or vegetables that will accompany the couscous. After 10 to 15 minutes, the couscous will be removed from the steamer and given time to cook a little before olive oil or butter is added to ensure the granules remain separate. After being fluffed up by hand, the couscous is returned to the steamer for another 10 to 15 minutes. This may be done up to 3 times, but the experienced cook will know when it is just right to be served. This skill will be passed down from generation to generation. Couscous can be served with vegetables, meat, fish, or tossed in a salad. It is also sometimes served as a sweet dish with butter, dates and hot milk, sprinkled with cinnamon. There are many ways to enjoy the national food of Algeria, and if you can only get pre-cooked couscous where you live, it is still worth adding to your menu. Be sure to try the traditionally prepared dish if you have the opportunity to explore Algeria.
This is Radio Algeria International, the all